Hey, everybody, welcome back to another podcast of Unpredictable. Today we have the best guest ever, Tyrell Maust, my
Hello,
husband.
hello. That is me.
Yes, I am so excited to do this podcast with him. At the beginning, he said he was not probably going to do one.
But there's reasons.
There's
I
reasons.
I'm not a podcasty voice. Like I'm not a person that's like, "Oh my goodness. Yes." I'm more calm and not that.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. So today is actually Thanksgiving. So we're recording on Thanksgiving Day. It's probably kind of dumb, but we're doing it because we got lots of time this morning before we have to go to our Thanksgiving lunch. Um, Best thing about Thanksgiving, go.
Um this is like the most basic answer, but probably see, I want to say everything. Like I can't say only food because only food isn't the best part. And I can't say only family because only family isn't the best part. But just I don't know, the whole so like if it's Christmas time, you can just like feel it in the air. Kind of that same concept of like you can just feel it in the air that it's Thanksgiving and you know exciting things are about to happen. And so maybe the feeling that you get, I don't know.
Okay. Yes. So the feeling in the air, I totally understand that. I feel like we have not been able to fully experience that because everyone is getting way too freaking excited about Christmas. You gotta wait.
Rightfully so.
You gotta wait. You gotta wait till after Thanksgiving to do anything Christmas. Like, we have no decorations. I have not listened to any Christmas music. I've done nothing, but he has.
Yes. Not very much. I've listened to a little bit of Christmas music. That's it.
I think it's wrong to listen to. I think it's wrong to do anything before Thanksgiving if it deals with Christmas. Um. So my best thing about Thanksgiving is, well, yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. Family and food, in my opinion.
Which is the most basic answers ever. But it's
Yeah,
true.
but
But
it
it's
is true.
true.
Yeah. But so, best food for the Thanksgiving meals. Mine,
Stuffing.
yes,
Stuffing all day.
stuffing. Same. It's literally the best. Is there a difference? Is there a big difference between chicken stuffing and turkey stuffing?
There might be. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, but I do know that I like the box stuffing better than like the homemade stuffing, which may be surprising.
Stuffing's just bread, right?
Pretty much. And I mean, it's not only bread, but
Yeah.
it's based out of bread.
Yeah. All right. Well, moving on from Thanksgiving, we are talking about eternity today. That is a huge attention grabber. But why is that? Why is that? Whenever you hear the word eternity, why does it grab our attention?
So I think it's like, I don't know, if we have a friend that is really interested in biology and he always says this really interesting fact about the human body and you're like, whoa, I didn't know that I could do that, or I didn't know my body did that. I think it's almost kind of the same thing of like it is physically not possible for us to comprehend everything about eternity or even much about eternity at all, but yet it's the thing that will affect us probably the most, or that has, yeah, that holds the most weight in our life. um, and so it's this probably the most important thing ever, but we don't understand it, and so we're grasping at straws in a way, trying to understand it, and so we get drawn in or maybe pushed away. And yeah, we can just never comprehend it, and so we're never satisfied with our knowledge. Maybe some people are, I don't know.
Yeah. I feel like, so some of the things I had written down is just like eternity. It's unknown. We have no idea what's going to happen. So I think there's a lot of fear. If you guys are like me, I'm scared. I'll be honest. Like, I feel like that's a thing that people aren't always super honest about. Of just like being scared for the end times and being honest about being scared that you don't know what's going to happen in eternity. Um or like not necessarily eternity, but like in Revelations when it talks about like the second coming of Christ, what does that look like? Or um what's the other one called? Where
Like
we all just bloop,
the rapture?
the rapture. There we go. I bought it was kind of crazy. Me and my cousins, we watched a movie kind of that it kind of seemed like it would have been the rapture. And literally people just went and they were gone. And it was like, what the heck? Where did everybody go? Um, and so like I don't even know. I don't remember how old I was, but I was just like, is that what's gonna happen? Like, are you just gonna poof go away? Like that's kind of scary, especially like for the people still here on Earth. Um, so yeah, I with the fear of it and everything, like we can read in Revelations and get a little grasp of what those things could look like. Um, but I don't know about you guys, but we have been married for 5 months, a little over 5 months now, and I am just now reading Revelations for the first time in my life. I could never read it before because I would start reading it and I would read about the rapture and the second coming of Christ and all these things, and it would scare the tar out of me that I would have to literally stop reading it because then at night, like, I would have so much anxiety and couldn't sleep.
Yeah, I think to kind of speak to that fear. I've definitely been there before too, where you're awake at 2 in the morning saying, "But what if? But what if?" Um, and I think that fear is natural in a lot of ways, but I think it's also important to move past that fear and to uh, recognize that we can approach the throne of grace with confidence because the Bible says that we can, and we can trust that Jesus is enough for us and enough for us to be right with the Father. And so I've definitely been there before with the fear, but I think it's also
Mhm.
vitally important to move past that fear and to be okay thinking about the end times and to be okay uh, in those types of situations.
Yeah, I know for me, I felt very I don't know, I felt a lot more comfortable being able to study it with someone else. And um yeah, we normally just like do a chapter at a time, write down what we feel like I don't know, the main story of whatever chapter we read on, and then we talk about it. And I feel like that's helped me a lot. So, how we got into this was this book that my mother, shout out to my mom, she probably won't watch this. She's been struggling trying to find this thing on YouTube. She literally can't, and I don't know why. But she told us about this book. It's called Driven by Eternity by John Revere. I highly recommend it. 10 out of 10, 100%.
10 out of 10. Hardcore.
Yeah. I think I listened to it and I was just like, "Baby, you have to
Yeah,
listen to
that's
this.
true.
It's insane." And so then he did. And now like and this so because of this book, that's why he was like, "Oh my word, I would totally do a podcast on that." Because of how insane this book is. It's literally insane.
True.
um should we, I guess,
We set the context of the book.
yeah, why don't you go ahead and set the
So
context of
to
the
set
book?
the context of this book, so the first, it's like I think it's like 9 hours long. Well, the audiobook is. Uh, and the first like 2.5 hours, I think, is a like a story, kind of like Adventures in Odyssey kind of a vibe, if you know what that is, which I'm assuming you do. And then the rest of it is like an actual book, like normal.
Or I want to add this in there too. Like, imagine Narnia
Yeah.
or something. Like, instead of watching the movie, it sounds like a movie, but it's just an audiobook.
Yeah. So we're basing our talk today off of that like movie portion, so to say. So in this world, it starts out with a reporter in Afghanistan who is just struggling to even talk. because of like war and those types of things. And then this random person named Sages comes up to me. He's like, "Hey, let me tell you a story." And eventually he does. And the story is about the book. Um, and in this story, there's this world where it's mostly based around these five friends who have just graduated from school, and are now kind of going out into life as an adult. Um, and it just kind of tells their stories, and then it talks about uh, heaven, and it talks about, like, it gives their story of going to heaven and standing before the throne. Um, so yeah, it's a really intriguing story about these five friends, which we will get into. So I think to also set some context, so they just graduated from school, and they all are given what the book calls entrustments, which I'm pretty sure is just like money, and they are also told to come to these meetings, which I'm going to assume is church. Um, so yes, they graduated from a Christian school, by the way, and God's name is now Jalen. That's what they refer to him as. And I should also mention these five friends have very weird names. So the names are Deceived, Faint Heart, Independent, Charity, and Selfish. Those are the names of the five people. Um, so they just graduated from school. They're all friends. They're meeting together. They're all given money and told to come to these meetings, and now they're going out into life. Okay, so yeah, so that's a lot of the context. So getting into the stories, we're going to kind of tag team talking about the five friends.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be talking about Charity and Selfish. So I will start with Selfish, we'll say. So he is a very political man who is very interested in politics, and later on runs for mayor in his town and becomes mayor, and is interested in a lot of leadership positions like that. But as his name suggests, he is selfish in his nature. So I should also say, right after they get out of school, the five friends go to this tree and carve their initials in it, and just kind of share their life stories of what they plan to do and everything like that. So Selfish says that he wants to become the mayor and all those types of things. That's basically him. He's very on the lookout for himself, and a very political man. One thing that does happen later on in the story, so he becomes a mayor, and he's now about to make a decision between giving land to the school where they were from, the Christian school, and just some lumber company, I think. And so the vote was tied, and so it was up to him to make the decision. So he walks up front, and eventually he gives the land to the company instead of the school, because the company basically was very involved in his like campaign of being the mayor and those types of things. So again, that was kind of just so showing his selfish nature. So Charity, she starts a restaurant and works at a homeless shelter, and is pretty much always on the lookout for others. And so, actually, when they were at that tree, she was the one asking everyone, like, "Hey, what are you gonna do?" And then eventually, someone asked her, and she was just like, "I don't actually know what I'm gonna do." And then someone, I think it was Selfish, actually suggested to open a restaurant,
Hmm.
and so she did, and was very generous in a lot of those ways, and just um, yeah, there was later, pretty much almost at the end of the book, it shares a story of how she was at the restaurant, and there was this other random guy named Ruthless who
Hmm.
was just, as his name suggests, pretty ruthless and not a good man in any way. But she went up to him and she shared the gospel with him and paid for his meal, and eventually he became saved and then died like a week later or something like that. And so I think that probably paints a pretty good picture of who she is, of just humble and insanely generous and always giving of herself and her time and her money. Um, so those are those two.
Yeah, and with her meeting Ruthless, she actually did like a soup kitchen kind of a thing,
Yeah.
and that's where she met Ruthless. So, the people I have, the guy's name is Deceived. He pretty much just did like everything right. like he I don't even remember completely the full details, but he like went to the meetings. He was
Oh,
nice.
yes, that's another thing I totally forgot to say about charity and selfish. Sorry.
Go ahead.
So with the whole meetings thing, so charity went to every single meeting all the time, and selfish, I believe, went to the meetings and then stopped going to the meetings. Um, and with the entrustments thing, everyone was given money, but charity was given the very least amount of
Hmm.
money, and I'm not even sure where selfish landed on that category. But it's important to note that charity was given the least and was still humble with it.
Yeah, so deceived. He like your average Joe, like doing everything correct, going to church, worshiping Christ, living a good life, never really doing anything wrong. But his heart just was kind of it was kind of like he just put a fake persona on, and his heart wasn't all in it. He was just doing it because it was the right thing to do. And then Faint Heart, she was literally the sweetest girl. The reason I thought of her whenever Narnia, not Lucy, uh,
The older one,
no, the younger one.
I think that's Lucy.
Is it Lucy? Yeah, it might be Lucy. What's the older one's name?
I don't know, but I'm pretty
Peter,
sure
Edmund, Lucy.
it doesn't matter. I'm pretty sure the
Okay,
younger one's Lucy.
okay. So the younger one, Faint Heart reminded me a lot of her. She was like the sweetest girl. She went to the meetings. Um, she had a heart for Jalen, which is Christ in this book, and just had the most loving heart ever. And then she was a teacher. Yeah, I think she actually started teaching at the school that she used to go to. And then she met another teacher, Double Life. She really, really wanted to work with this teacher because he was a really, really good teacher. And he asked her to come and help him teach in his classroom. And so she did. So she started working with him, or she was about to. And then this other chick was spreading rumors that Faintheart had slept with either Double Life or a student or something. And she was just like, oh my, like Faintheart was just like, oh my word, I cannot believe she did this. She's gonna pay or something. So she started having unforgiveness in her heart. And then her and Double Life actually started having an affair. And then Faintheart actually caught Double Life with the girl that had spread a rumor about her. So then Faintheart just had unforgiveness towards these people. And like Sages had talked to Faintheart and was like, hey, like, are you forgiving them? You can't, like, unforgiveness in your heart is just going to make you bitter. You need to forgive them. So she tried to. And she was like, in the book, it was or like it was saying how she was trying to forgive or like whatever. She was like, oh, like Double Life, like I forgive you, it's totally fine, except no, I hate you and all this stuff. So it was kind of funny watching that or hearing that, I guess.
And actually, one more thing that I'll add about Deceived. So he actually said, just kind of did a lot of things right and claimed that Jalen was true. But he also said that he claimed Jalen was true, but Jalen wants us to have a good time, and he's compassionate, and I'm just counting on his grace. And so kind of had that idea. He was also a businessman who built houses, but they turned out to be too expensive. Um, but then he started to use like cheaper grade materials that weren't good, but was still charging the same prices and was making lots of money and those types of things. So that was him. And then Independent, so Deceived and Independent were kind of two friends, really close friends. And so Independent wanted to be his own boss. And he was the only one that outright said, I don't believe in Jalen. Um,
Independent
yeah.
was okay.
Um, and
Oh, was that said? He said that at the tree
yeah,
too.
he
Yeah.
said that at the tree. And everyone was super shocked, and he was just like, "Oh my goodness, how is that true?" Yeah, so Independent was just like, "There's no way he would be loving with like all these strict rules and these types of things." And later, actually shares a story of how he, as a kid, he got lost in the woods and was crying out to Jalen and waiting for him to come. but just couldn't. Um, and he couldn't. Eventually, his mom came or something, and he didn't feel anything uh, from Jalen. So yeah, that is those five, and kind of a little bit about what they did in their life.
Yeah.
And then, so I will also say that the heaven is called. Do you remember what it's called? Affabel.
Alphabet.
And then
Yes.
hell is called the land of Lone.
Yes.
Um, and so then the day of judgment comes, and all of them are taken. And then we'll also talk a little bit about their heaven stories.
So getting into their heaven stories. So this was actually really, really cool. And I wonder if this is how it could be for us. So it was really cool whenever they were, I don't know if this was technically the rapture or just like, I'm guessing it was kind of the form of the rapture. It was in the middle of the night and they were all taken and they all knew that they were together. And then they were like riding a chariot thingamabob.
Yeah,
And they were able to talk and trying to figure out like where they're going. And then they like came over a peak and they were in Affabel.
yeah. So
And it was pretty crazy. And like I wonder if that's how it's going to be. Like how cool would that be if that's what would happen? Like for me, I always think it's just going to be like that and we're just going to be in heaven and we're going to be there. But it would be really cool to be able to like going up in the sky, and we just see what's all going on and then wow, we see heaven and we see it all and it's crazy. Anyways, he's going to tell, are you going to tell the
yeah,
stories
so
now? Okay.
they, uh, yeah, so they all showed up, and they could see these two very large doors, which led into the throne room where Jalen was, and a bunch of other people.
Yeah.
Um, and so Independent went first. So just to remind you, he was the guy that was like, I don't believe in Jalen. He was the only
Mhm.
one that said that. Sages, their teacher from the school, also showed up with them and would kind of walk them to the edge of the door, and then they would go in. And so they were able to have kind of a little bit of a conversation before they actually went to judgment. And so Independent and Sages were talking, and Independent just kind of had the attitude of like, oh my goodness, I was wrong all of these years. Now
Yeah.
I do believe. And then he said, at least my good deeds outweighed my bad deeds, probably.
Yeah.
Um, and so then he went into the judgment room, and then they also would have, I the best way I can describe it is like a movie theater, basically, where it would play pretty much every single thing that you did in your life in front of everyone, basically.
Yeah, I'm gonna quickly describe just the throne room itself. So pretty much it was like you walked into the big doors, huge like ballroom kind of vibe.
Or
Or
even like a
Like Narnia on the one it showed like where they were at their castle and they had like their four chairs up there and it was like this huge room. And that's why I'm guessing kind of like what that like this is what that vibe gave of there was thrones in the back. There was a huge room, and then there was one big throne at the top, and there was people all around that throne room.
Yes. So Independent walks in, sees Jalen, and then Jalen says, here's the video of your life," and they play it and recap all of the bad things.
Yeah, that was really cool.
And then Jalen says, "Is Independent's name written in the book of life?" And it turns out, no, it's not. And A few things that Jalen said after that. He says that Independent was guilty of choosing an evil nature, and then Independent kind of came back with a, "But my good deeds outweighed my bad ones." And then Jalen kind of brought the verse about like, if you if you break one law, you're guilty of breaking the whole law. Um, and just kind of went with that. And it's impossible to be good enough, impossible to have good enough deeds. And then Independent kind of just said, "But you said you're merciful and da 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 da." Yeah, and just kind of Jalen kind of then just said, "If I would let you into heaven, that would be letting corruption into a perfect place, and that is just
Yeah,
not possible."
yeah,
Um, and so then at that point, then he would just go to hell, and you would hear screaming and like chains and everything, and then he would just go to hell,
yeah.
and that was it. And then Next up was Selfish, who he was the mayor guy. And so he kind of had that conversation with sages as he went. But then, actually, before he went to judgment, he met uh, a friend or maybe a fellow like political man, and he was like, "Hey, good to see you. Why are you all the way in the back?" And then basically he just tells him about how
Mhm.
there is like a class system in heaven of like there are rulers and people who I think they said
Yeah.
lived in the like lowlands and
Mhm.
was their work was more
We'll get into more of that
exclusive.
later after the
Um,
stories.
and so he meets him, finds that out, and he talks to sages and he says, "Look, there's still room up on the throne, like up high by Jalen.
Mhm.
There's still some seats that are empty. Maybe Jalen has one received or one reserved for me." And so he walks in, meets Jalen. One other thing that's really important to mention, so Selfish is walking up to the throne and he sees one of his assistants like way up in the front. And he's like, "Oh my goodness, how did she get here? She was just an assistant, and that's it."
Mhm.
And then Sages was just like, "Yeah, she was just an assistant, but she was good and she was faithful and she did her job well, even if it was being an assistant." Yeah, and so that kind of happened. Then he goes to Jalen. They play the video of his life, and sometimes Jalen would ask, "How many people did Selfish impact for the kingdom?" And it turned out to be 17, I believe, for Selfish. But then he asked how many people were impacted by his assistant, and it was like 5,000 some or something like that. Long story short, Selfish did actually make it to heaven, and his name was written in the book of life, but he was in the back and lived in the lowland. So that was kind of him.
So then Deceived is next, and he was the guy that had done everything right and like looked like from the outside lived a perfect life. So he was called. His life played out in front of him, and his life pretty much was all good. And then Jalen was like, "Is Deceived's name in the book of life?" And they were like, "No." And he was like, "What? Like I did everything right." And then Jalen came back with a response of, "Yes, you did everything right, but your heart was not in it. And you didn't like truly, truly believe in me. You just did it for the right reasons." But his heart just was not in it. And so then he went to hell. And then Faint Heart was next. And she watched her life play out. And everything was good except for whenever um double life came into play, and she had the affair with him, and then didn't forgive him or the girl that had spread that rumor about her sleeping either with Double Life or the student. I can't remember what that rumor was about. So Jalen was like, "Is Faint Heart's name in the Book of Life?" And the answer was no. And she was just like, "What? I literally believed in you. I followed you through everything." And Jalen's response was, "You had unforgiveness in your heart and you turned bitter." She was just like, "What?" And she, on her way in, she had seen Double Life, and she was just like, "Why can I not get in, but Double Life is here?" Jalen was pretty much just like, "I'm sorry," and then she went to hell. Double Life was there in the throne room, but then Jalen called him up, and he was like, "Double Life, you were a stumbling block to Faint Heart." So his name was not in the Book of Life. So they ended up taking him to another place. But there's one more story yet, and then we'll get into that. The
Yes.
different
So
places yet.
so Charity is was the last one to go. And as so Charity walked in and saw Jalen, and Jalen actually said to her, like, "I've been longing for this moment. I've been
Yeah.
longing for you to come." Um, and she and then Jalen just says, like, "You gave me drink when I was thirsty, and you gave me food when I was hungry." And Charity was just like, "What? How did I do that?" But then Jalen was just like, "Every time you cared for one of the least of these, like you did that for me." And um, yeah, and so she did that. And one thing I think was really powerful was Jalen said how he saw every single small thing that she did, and how
Mhm.
he said how he saw her when she was weeping at night for the lost, and he saw her whenever she was serving and not being recognized, whenever
Mhm.
she gave and got nothing in return. He saw that, and he counts that. He did say then that like there were some times when she failed to hear his voice and she wasn't totally perfect. And there were some times when she failed to listen to the
Yeah.
spirit, basically. Eventually she went to heaven. She got actually one of the like the big thrones up at the
Yeah.
top with
Mhm.
Jalen, which was really cool. And so yeah, that was just a really, really powerful story and something that really impacted me.
Right, yeah. All the whole entire book was huge. It was really amazing. And I think also one other thing that was really cool with Charity's story was after they said that her name was in the book, all the people on the thrones like stood up and not worshipped, but like more like praised. And I think Ruthless, she was talking to
Yeah.
Ruthless, and she was like, why is everybody worshiping me? Like, that's not what's supposed to happen. And Rufus was like, no, we're praising that you're here, that you're finally home. And that was really, really cool that like everybody in the throne room was celebrating that she was finally home. So then the people that went to hell, it was really cool. They talked about, I think it almost was like different levels of hell. So Double Life, who was the one who was a stumbling block for Faint Heart, he went to just a dark place with it was dead quiet, and that was it, and it was that he was by himself. The other three, then I think it sounded like they were in the hellfire. That's my guess. They all just all of a sudden started screaming like crazy. That was something that we want to bring up. Of I think it talks. I've heard people talk about it. I think it says something in the Bible of like different levels of different things. Like, do we just go straight to hell when we die if we're not a Christian? Or is there a place that we go to before we go to hell until Judgment Day comes? And do we actually go to heaven when we die? Or is there another place that we go to before we actually go to heaven before Judgment Day? Um, and some of those things were just talked about in the book. And that was really cool. It gives you a whole new perspective, I think, on eternity and what Judgment Day and what the rapture could look like. Listening to that and listening to how the soldiers or whatever came in the middle of the night and took them.
Yeah.
But then they were there talking and could see where they were going. And once they got over that peak, they knew where they were and how beautiful it was. And obviously, we don't know how that's going to be, but I think having a good, more beautiful mindset of it, of just the rapture and everything is really important. I had two dreams in the past month, where we were all at a gathering at a church, and all of a sudden Christ was coming, and we saw him coming. And in the first dream, I was terrified, and I was looking around for someone I knew, and I couldn't find anyone, and I was just terrified. And then the second dream I just had recently, same thing. We were all at a church, at a huge gathering, and we saw Christ coming. And I just had so much just joy in my heart and so much excitement. And I think reading Revelations, us doing that together, and reading this book has helped me just have, instead of letting like, what if this, what if that, all those thoughts scare me, having beautiful um, thoughts of what it could look like, I think helps me a lot, which obviously it might not be. We don't know. Yeah, I think, and then sometimes it talks about in the Bible too, like having fear of the Lord. And what is that? What does that mean? There is definitely a healthy fear. There's a fear that's just way like, whoa, that's a little much. You shouldn't fear this much. But there is a healthy fear of Christ, because I think if you have a healthy fear, you're not just gonna wanna not do anything about not
Yeah.
like knowing who Christ is.
There's a verse in the Bible, I don't know where, but it says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of all wisdom.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so I
I
definitely
th-
agree.
I think that makes you want to study and make you want to know who Christ is, because you don't know, and you're scared because you don't know, and so that healthy fear makes you figure out a little bit of who Christ is and study more about Him.
Yeah, so I think maybe just to kind of conclude and maybe wrap up
Hmm.
a little bit, in looking at why these people went to heaven or hell, I think we can really see a lot about even ourselves in a way by looking at that. And so I think, I mean, really the core of it just boils down to who are you living for? Is it yourself or is it God?
Yeah.
And are you just living up your life thinking that you'll receive grace on that day and just leaning on that? I mean, we will receive grace, but are you living your life here for Christ or not? Are we holding unforgiveness against people and holding that bitterness
Yeah.
with ourselves and against other people? Are we just outright claiming that God doesn't exist and um, just living a life totally apart from Christ? Are we only concerned about ourselves and our status and how people see us?
Hmm.
Um, or are we like Charity and we continue to be faithful to God and to serve even when no one sees it and always be focused on building up others? I think um, one thing that I think it was with, I think Selfish actually, when he met someone, when he was talking to his assistant, I believe, talked about how we will be held accountable for every single word we say and
Yeah.
for every idle word, every inappropriate joke, every mean
Hmm.
comment, every gossip, every
Yeah.
single word that we say, like we will be held accountable for. And so I think that even just pushes us to not only just be careful with what we say,
Yeah.
but let our words be meaningful and building up and not just how was the football game today. Um, so yeah, I think we can look and what it just boils down to who are we living for
Yeah.
and recognizing that God has grace for us whenever we live for Him and
Hmm.
um, we can wholly lean on that and totally trust on that and approach the throne
Yeah.
with confidence and um, yeah, just turn in repentance to Him and trust that He is holding our future and
Hmm.
holding our eternity.
Yeah. And this isn't to just say like nitpick your life, but I think there's a thing too of I think people rely way too much on grace and don't really look at their life like in detail of like, hey, am I actually doing everything possible to live for Christ? And just like the thing I go back to is whatever you do on the outside, that's what people see. But God knows your heart. So if you're doing something not correct, God knows your heart. He'll figure it out. And that was something that was huge for me. Like having some unforgiveness in my heart. I never really thought about it, and then this, I was just like, you know what? That makes perfect sense. Like, why in the world, like kind of whichever one it was, who if Jalen would let him in, that would be corruption in heaven. Like, if I'm bitter because I don't want to forgive someone, why in the world should I go to heaven? Like, I shouldn't go to heaven, period. But we do get a chance to go to heaven. But if I have unforgiveness in my heart, even if it might seem or feel like a little thing, like that's putting corruption in heaven. And that's heaven's perfect, you know? The fairness, too, like whether or not we get to heaven. Something I thought of was Trevor, my brother in law. I'll shout him out. And whenever he said it, I was just like, wow, that is huge. If you can understand a glimpse of how much God loves you, it'll change your entire life. Like, it's insane. Like, I never thought about it like that. And then I heard Trevor preach on that, and I was just like, hold it. That's it. That is insane. We will not be able to understand fully what God's love is for us. But if we can understand it just a little bit, it's crazy and it will change your life. At least it helped me change my life a little bit. So,
Yeah, I think I definitely agree.
do you have any more thoughts that you want to share?
No, I don't think so. I think my closing thoughts are, for one, go listen to the book.
Yes,
You
100%.
will understand it much better from what we told you.
Yeah.
And uh, we need to learn to rely on Christ, and
Hmm.
um, don't be afraid to live for Him, even if it means dying to yourself, because that's ultimately
Yeah.
what the call is.
Yeah. Alrighty. Well, thank you so much for coming on, baby.
Yes, thank you for
I
having me.
love you.
Love you
Thanks
too.
for coming on. Yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. The next one, I think I might do by myself and just do like a recap of everything. I'm not sure yet what I want to do. There's I might be doing another one with one person yet. I mean, like I have more coming obviously, but like there's one that I still have up in my head that I kind of want to do, but I'm waiting to see if this person actually wants to do it and when it works for us to do it. So hope you all had a great Thanksgiving, and I hope you guys have a Merry Christmas. See you guys.